excitingly, we've got some, hopefully all the bits and bobs I need to rebuild the first stage of the engine anyway. So I've got a gasket set, which I think will do all the jobs. Into the box, we've got some new silent blocks for mounting the engine. New output shaft, which looks very new, lovely splines. These splines here that have gone on the current one. Gears are put on there, looks good. We've got the engine bolts. The crankcase is back together, and that includes the 4 ones around the piston area, and I've got some rubbers for the kickstart. I've got a set of gaskets which also includes ones for like the kickstart as well as the main bearings. That's easy, that's good. I've got a new cruciform for the gear selector. We've got both the clutch and flywheel nuts and the locking washers. We've got a kit to rebuild the Cush drive for one of my next jobs, and we've got a full set of bearings that I need. So I think now, first job, I think I'm just going to get the 4 main bearings into the 2 halves of the crankcases. So, like pretty much every job on this thing, it's taken an awful lot longer than I thought it would. So I'm trying to get the silent blocks into the swing arm mounting. One there, and then they meet in the middle in there. But in the end, I managed to kind of fabricate a threaded bar with various washers and bolts and right contraption. Had to heat up this area a lot to just give it enough room, but I think now I've got them both in. I've double checked the measurement from each end against the scooter, so I'm pretty sure that fits. So I'm going to undo this side here now, and hopefully both of the silent blocks will be contained inside the actual housing. Seems to be okay there. Another one. It's okay there. So I just want to double check the distance between the two metal bits. Check that back on the scooter, and hopefully that's all tickety-boo. Just quickly put the gears onto the new output shaft. Got a shim already on, the original shim that was with it. Put the circlip on, so I'm just going to check the float of the gears. They feel quite tight. So as I understand it, it should be between 0.15 of a mil and 0.4 of a mil. So I've got the two feeler gauges here. So the 0.15 of a mil will slide in, but the 0.4 of a mil will not fit. It's going to be, it won't go in at all. That's got a slight bit of drag in there, so it's somewhere between 0.15 of a mil and 0.4 of a mil, so that should be tickety-boo. It's quite tight. So happy with that. Right, so I'm going to start to refurbish the Cush drive. So what I need to do is just grind these rivets down a little bit, so I can then hopefully drill them out relatively easily. This plate's going to be replaced anyway, so that's not a problem. The springs actually all look okay, but I'm going to replace them anyway. So I now want to finish drilling out these, so I can take this back plate off here as well. Right, I've got both plates off. Inevitably it's not as easy as that now, so the remainder of the rivets are left in there, so I'm going to have to just tiny grind a little bit off so I can then knock the rivets out. So, usual thing, 10-minute job, hour and a half later, we have finally got the Cush drive separated. So that all needs a good clean up in there, that's fine. Those are the two plates off there and there. Took a long time to get the rivets out. Got the plates off quite quickly, but the rivets were really embedded inside there, so it took a lot of drilling and a lot of bashing and a little bit of grinding to get them out. Other than that, it's fine. Those are all the springs, so I've actually got a kit I'm going to replace all of those springs, both of those, and I've got some new rivets which I've got to put through, peen over, and then that'll be ready to go back in. Whew, blimey. Right, having spent a stupid amount of time trying to get these rivets out of this yesterday, I'm now in a position to rebuild this Cush drive. I've checked that the new rivets all fit through, there's no debris left inside any of the holes, so that's good. And what we need to do is, this only fits one way, it goes like saw. And then inside each one of these 6 gaps is the actual cushion, and what we do is got one big spring and one little spring inside it. They've got to be squeezed into place in there 6 times round. Then we have the plates. So I've now got all 6 sets of springs and all centred. That went without a hitch. So now I've got to put these plates on. I can just see that they're slightly countersunk on one side, so I'm guessing that the countersunk bits need to be outwards. Right, so I've just done double check, and the flat plate is the one that goes underneath, and it's slightly countersunk on there, so it'll go that way. And the upper one is the one that's got the ridge all the way around it, and again slightly countersunk, so that'll go like that. Rivets go down and in from the top, which is going to give quite a nice flat, because the tolerances are quite small around there, so that's going to be nice and flat. That'll go into there, and then underneath, and it's going over there, and then I just need to pin that over. Probably putting that bit there on the vise, so I've got a really hard surface to hit. So I think what I need to do is just gently start that, but not finish it off, and then do the same for all of the others so they're all loose, and then tighten them up. Just doing each one loosely at the moment to make sure everything fits. Couple more to go. Place now, so all I need to do is pin them right now and get them tight. Right, well there we are, finished. Not a bad job. These rivets pretty flat, well, very flat around the top side, got them really flat around the bottom side, and we've got a good seal all the way around both edges. Cleaned it up with degreaser. That's good to go. Happy with that. So we're now working on the crankshaft on the flywheel side, and we have the old bearing brace, the inner bearing brace, which fits on here. Got that off, no problem, in the bearing puller. We have a new one to put in on, so in a moment we're going to have to heat this up and then figure out a way of driving it back on. Probably use that to kind of pad it out a little bit and then have a socket over the top of that. However, the tricky bit is that when this is on, there needs to be a kind of 1mm-ish gap between the crank and the bottom of the bearing brace. I think that's probably just so that you can take it off again by putting a bearing puller behind it. So what I've done is I've made a little spacer. So this is some of the sheet metal I use for the repairs. So what I'm going to do, what I've done is I've created a sort of template which will go over this. I'm going to try and put it into place now. So this is going to go over here. Pushes down, I can kind of just gently tack it into place. Maybe put another tape to hold it. And now that means there's 4 places around here where we've got I think it's a 1.1mm piece of sheet metal, which I can drive that onto, and then once that's in place I can then undo the tape and pull away the 2 bits of metal. Right, so I've now got these 2 spanners there and there are just supporting this upper web, which is where I'm going to drive the bearing onto. Now we can see just got a millimetre gap around there. So regarding pulling the crank into the crankcases, it's got to go through, this is the old bearing, but it's got to go get pulled that way into this bearing, which the new one is actually already in the crankcase. I can't hit this end to drive it in because these webs aren't supported through the middle, so it'll bend and disform. So I've had a look online, and to get one that I think will do the job is probably going to be 40-50 quid. So I'm going to have a go at making something which I think is going to work. So we have to imagine this is in the sort of partly into the crankcase. That is definitely mounted in the crankcase, and I've got to pull that through. So what I'm going to do is I've ordered, just for demonstration, I've ordered a piece of tubing to go here, some steel tubing about that long, about 10 centimetres long, which will go over there, and it actually fits flush with the inner part of the bearing. I'm then going to get this nut here is the correct thread to go onto the end of the crank. I've got some threaded bar knocking around in the workshop, so I'm going to use a piece of this, and this is the correct nut that goes on here. So what I'm intending to do is weld those 2 nuts together, because unfortunately they're different threads, so I'm going to weld those 2 bolts together so that one of them can thread on to the end of the crank and the other one is free. I'm then going to screw that one in as far as it will go to there, and then I'm going to weld that nut to this bolt, so I'll have that arrangement at one end, which will actually be able to then screw onto there. With my long spacer tube, that will thread in, screw on, the spacers over there with a big whacking grate and a washer on the end, and then if I then screw one of these nuts down to that washer and then keep screwing, that's going to pull, I think, will pull this up and out. So that's what we're going to try, and if it doesn't work, I'll probably bin all these videos. We shall see. Right, so I've welded the two nuts together. It's all very rough and ready, but it doesn't really matter. So now I'm going to weld this, as you look at it, this top bolt, I'm going to weld it to a threaded bar. I'm initially just hanging it from the vise so that it hangs absolutely central, rather than having it down on the desk where it might not be quite central. So just tack it and then see if we can finish it off. So there we are now. We've now bombed round and put some weld around there. So that nut is welded to the bar, that nut is welded to that nut, and I've got a good full nut size to be able to thread onto there.